And now here's part 2 of our episode. Tim, why is this the standout track from the album?
Yeah, in some ways, it's nice that we had the lead-up conversation we did, because I think it connects to that. I think it shows the biggest range that exists on this album within one song. You know, it starts really simply. It has this really good build. It's not really a complex song. And so many of these songs in many ways are simple. Like, they follow really traditional song format. Though interestingly, like, song formats that we don't always use anymore. Like, I think some of them have basically like A, B, C, D every verse instead of like verse, pre-chorus, chorus. They have these other developments. But like Honey and I is even more stripped down in some ways, but the like starting from that just little guitar lick that goes down those chords, building to that like, you know, drums like driving, like rock shouting moment at the end is just it's just so good. And it would not have been one of my favorite songs when the album was released, but like re-listening to it, I didn't decide on that as my standout track until like I decided on this album and was re-listening for this podcast, and was re-listening to it over and over, and had, of course, like many people, I'm sure, the hardest time choosing, because there's part of me that's like, there's not the actual standout track is the first two, but not just the first one or the second one. It's the 1-2 punch of those two. Yeah, is another one for me. But yeah, I think Honey and I is also to think about, like, if a standout track is something that I might recommend to someone, to be like, give this a try to see if you might be interested in listening to this whole album. It has a fun hook to it to like start as one thing and build into something really cool.
Oh, I like that take too, because it's very obviously not the most popular song on the album. Right. So like if somebody here, I'm gonna set up a scenario for you. Okay. Here, let me paint a picture for you. Let me real quick. So, somebody comes up to you and say, "Hey, I heard you were on This One Goes to 11 talking about that album by Haim. How cool was that you were on that podcast?" And they'll say, "Man, I've heard The Wire, but I don't know. I've just never heard the rest of that album. I wonder what it's like. Could you tell me?" And then you would tell them to listen to Honey and I, because they already know the big hit.
Yes.
But this is another entryway. It's the back door. You know, it's like the sneaky way. It's the sneaky way to get into the castle. That's pretty cool. That's well chosen.
Thank you. I mean, wait, y'all do it too. You choose what you think they are, right? Do we talk about that now?
We kind of did away with that after a few years. I think for me, it's The Wire. It is. And it made it easy that you didn't choose The Wire, you know, because I sort of get to say, like, yeah, but this song is still an all-timer. It's like, especially for that era, 2013.
Yeah.
Big song. It was a great song.
Yeah, it's great.
I mean, for me, a little bit, re-listening this week, I kind of dug If I Could Change Your Mind, because it was the one that sounded the most like a 1980s pop song to me.
It's a really good one.
Like, I was at the gym listening to it, and I was like, this really... I tried to think, like, no, maybe it's not 80s. I'm like, no, this is like the 80s-est 80s song to ever 80s town. Like, it was...
They would love that, too. They would love that.
You know, as someone who grew up in the 80s, like, you know...
Yeah, I think I like that song a lot. I think that sort of 80s feel is one that I really like. I had forgotten how much I love the end of the album. I really love those last like songs where it starts to slow down and it gets really big. I think those are some of the best on the album. They're so beautiful. Like this, they're still poppy. They still have this. And I think that's one of the other things that amazes me about the album is that it's all this pop music. Even The Wire. I don't really know how to describe this. Maybe y'all from listening to it will help me parse out what I've always thought about this, which is that the music is mostly really peppy overall. Mm-hmm. Like there's a brightness, happiness to it, but it sounds dark. There's something about it that is always dark in some way.
I think it's your voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's your voice. She has a very earthy voice.
Yeah.
It's very much like you don't expect, you see her and like, God love her. She's a beautiful woman. And like, she's like this is not a slight at all, but you look at her and you think that she's not going to sound like she does when she sings.
Right. Yeah.
It's incongruous in some ways for some reason. And I'm not saying that's for any particular reason. I'm just saying like, that's that's the impression I get. And like hearing her talk in interviews, she's totally, she's very San Fernando Valley. And I say that as somebody who grew up in the San Fernando Valley, I own that as well. So she's beautifully from the San Fernando Valley. So, but I think that's one of the things that gives it edge. Yeah. If it was somebody who didn't have some edge to their voice, these songs wouldn't work as well, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's sort of a contrast there because I think about like their guitar, even their guitars sound bright.
So
like,
bright.
I just think about, to think about a song from their third album, The Steps, like when the guitar comes in, it's not like a deep, like snarling guitar. It has this kind of like yeah, and so then when her voice comes in, her voice is a little deeper and richer, and so I think that it kind of blends it out, and it prevents it from sounding exactly like a 1980s pop hit. Like it prevents it from going totally into Debbie Gibson territory. Not that there's anything wrong with Debbie Gibson. We love Debbie Gibson. So
I got a hot take for you here. I think she has a similar rich quality to her voice that Lady Gaga does.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
I think there's some shared character there. You know what I mean?
In that, they both, I feel like, have that similar, usually sit in that lower part, like that alto part of a voice that isn't as common in pop singing. Yeah, but I can hear that. And I think, and I agree with you, but I've never thought about it because their singing styles are so different. Because I remember hearing I actually, when I was in college, this is after college because this album came out after college for me. I used to do this yearly thing with some musician friends where we would play a New Year's Eve show and we would learn a song, and we learned Falling, the second song.
Cool. Good
from
song.
This album. Wait, no, Falling's the first song. We learned Forever, the second song from the album. And I sang it. We only had to move it down. I don't even have like a high tenor voice. We only had to move it down a little bit for me to be able to hit the actual range, like change the key. It's like a tiny bit.
Hell yeah, bro.
I sang it, and one of my friends was listening when we were practicing. And I was like, "How does it sound?" He's like, "It's not right because you're not. Or to sound right, you have to sing more like her. You have to like cut things off really quickly. She sings so percussively, so quickly. Like there's no held note almost ever. It's very rare for her to like hold a note. It's like, especially on this first album. I think as the albums go on, she finds more. But I think that's one of the reasons it reminds me of Michael Jackson is like, so much of Michael Jackson is the like the percussive, quick staccato way of singing is what he does a lot. And then he'll go into long notes. And Danielle Haim's really good at that. Her delivery of that is really good.
Man, we got to talk. We still haven't talked about Michael Jackson for obvious reasons, but
I wouldn't say those are the reasons, right? Partially, it's just not many people have nominated him.
Well, I think, and also no one's nominated Thriller yet, but
no one's nominated Thriller.
No one's nominated Thriller.
Well, I don't know if anyone wants to talk about
they don't want to.
I mean,
that's a peek behind the curtain, I guess, right?
Yeah,
but
but that's the thing is like, if somebody nominated Thriller, chances are we're going to choose it. That's not. We can't.
We're ready to talk about it.
Oh my God, it's somebody's not going to nominate that willy-nilly either.
Right.
Yeah.
And interestingly, I know that they said that she was a contralto, Danielle. So I wonder if Gaga also is. I don't know voice parts like that.
Right.
Michael might know better.
I'm just trying to think of where that fits. Is that between soprano and alto?
I think contralto is lower.
I think it's
lower than alto.
I think it's lower than alto.
Tenor and alto.
Yeah.
Have you seen Gaga's new music video? Sorry to go on a side tangent.
No. Is it good?
I don't know.
Oh, bummer. Who directed it?
I don't know.
You sound unenthused. You sound unenthused. So say no more.
Well, it's just she's like whatever. That's another conversation.
We're going to be talking about Gaga one of these days.
All right. Well, it feels like the right time to acknowledge that we asked you here, Tim, not just to shoot the shit, three nerdy guys talking about music here, but there's a very important task we have to accomplish here. And since we asked you to nominate albums that you believe are perfect, and we did not define the word perfect for you, now we need you to define how you define the word perfect for us. So what were your standards for perfection when arriving at your list?
Man, yeah. Okay, yeah. So I guess we're going back to my. I mean, before we started, I said that I wanted to get confrontational.
That's true. Yeah, dear listeners, off mic, he said he's ready for a fight, and
he looked real scary when he said it too.
Yeah, he was wearing a big leather jacket with those rivet things on the sleeves. It was intense.
But yeah, so I mean, in general, and I imagine I may not be the first person to say this, but I don't think there is perfect, of course, and I'm not trying to throw y'all under the bus. I imagine that in a deep discussion of it, we would probably all be like, yeah, of course, no album.
Throw us. We don't care.
No, we throw ourselves under said bus every episode, so it's fine.
Let me throw you under. No, yeah, I mean, I think. Yeah, I mean, some of it goes some of what we've already talked about, like the time in my life when I found this album that was a really good time, and so it has those sort of associations for me. But I do think, I mean, one thing for me is that I love a good debut album. Like you don't always get them. Yes, you get them more often than you get a good sophomore album, but like hearing artists who feel largely fully formed on the first one, and like Haim has changed a considerable amount. I mean, the second album is pretty similar to this one in many ways, and the third album I think is the greatest growth or just change in their current releases of music. But I feel like this first album is just so, what is it? It just builds. I mean, similarly, I'm repeating again, like going off on tangents of things we talked about. It builds this atmosphere and it sticks to it, and it's such good. Yeah, oh, and here's the other thing. I was thinking about this too, re-listening to it, several times to prepare for this, and because just when you're coming onto something like this, you start listening different. Your mind engages with the album differently, and I was like, oh wow, these lyrics aren't great. Are they? That's never been for me. That's never the first thing I listen to. I still have some of my favorite albums that I couldn't sing you every lyric on them. And it's probably most albums for me. Especially, and that also happens. As a fan of, as I know y'all are, as a fan of Radiohead. Unless you really sit down with the lyrics, sometimes you can't tell what Tom York is quietly wailing in his weird head voice / falsetto.
Yeah. Well, as our friend Eric Richardson likes to say, the lyrics will be there for you when you want them or when you need them. That's, and I think about that a lot. And it's funny. It's funny how that realization only came to you after you started listening to it, with a sort of your ear had been tuned in one way towards this album until this point. Then, huh?
Yeah, and I think, and that's it, because I feel like some people, I would die on the hill of saying that, like, musically, this is an excellent album, like amazingly excellent. Like, is it as complex as some people can write music? No, right? Yeah, are some people like being weirder with their chord choices and making crazy decisions that really show that they can stretch a sense of musicality and create really interesting things. Yes, there are people who do that better, and I love some of that music. But for being able to create a groove, find a groove, and create a feeling of a song and make it entertaining and catchy and interesting, I feel like this album is perfect in that regard. It's one of those things, I think I hear bass a lot too. I think like one of the reasons I started playing bass before I ever got to guitar is like I've always been obsessed with rhythm. So like good percussion and good bass always grabs me. And I think Este Haim is a great bassist. I think, especially on this album, I think she's amazing. And she's
quite good. Yeah.
Right. And it's not because she's never going to do like Flea in Atoms for Peace weirdness, but she's like, she creates exactly what those songs need. Exactly.
I mean, you say that, but she does have a degree in ethnomusicology. So like, if anyone in the band is going to do their Flea thing, it's probably Este.
Right. But yeah, I feel like, but nothing in this album feels like an academic exercise. And I'm not against academic exercises in music. Sometimes
good point.
But all of it feels like most of it is made to like, what do you want to drive in your car with the windows down and listen to? What do you want to dance to when you're in your room? Yeah. What do you like want to shout at the top of your lungs with when you're with your friends? And like that to me is like that can make a perfect album. And I think
but not in like a capitalistic way, not in like a, hey, what's going to get the most, butts and seats. Like It's not that it's different than that for you.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah. It feels completely their own. It doesn't feel like it was someone. I don't feel like they were making a sound to appease people, because I think if this had truly won, and I think that's one of the reasons you don't see it being called a pop album, because if they wanted to make a pop album, they could have found the producer and worked in the way, I think, to do that and potentially had a bigger album. But I think this really feels like their creation. It feels like these three artists in collaboration with other musicians, of course, but like these artists saying, this is what we make. This is who we are.
Totally. I like this thing about them being fully formed, because it really did just feel like it was like, here's these girls from the Valley. There they are. Yeah. That's it. That's them. That's it. This is like their whole character, their whole essence captured. So are you making the argument that a debut album being this good gives it a little bit of cred over a sophomore album that is this good? Like if it was a dead heat in terms of quality, if it was the debut, you would give the edge to the debut over the sophomore?
Yeah, I think in some ways,
it's hard to make two good albums, dude.
Yeah. And I think, thinking about this band in particular, I think their sophomore album is very good. But I think their third album in some ways is their best. Yes. Like it is in some ways the best album that they released. And yes, maybe it's better than Days Are Gone by certain metrics, but thinking about, like when I love listening to that album, and I've listened to it a lot too, but yeah, coming back to this one and considering this band, like knowing that I wanted to suggest an album from this band, I was like, it's this one for me. For whatever reason, it is that it does get that edge because it is the first thing, but still so impressive. And of course that third one's better. I mean, they've been doing it at that point for even more years, so it takes on new complexity. But this first one, I think I'm like, it's just such a great picture of just doing something really cleanly and like cutting through all of it to make this beautiful, I will always say, pop album.
All right, Tim, it's time to get really serious. We've been faffing around here.
We have faffed.
Now we gotta really deal with this now. And so it's time for us to move to what Tyler and I refer to as the
deliberation phase. We kind of hit that really good. That was good right there.
It's like everyone's so like when I edited the last one, we weren't quite on, but like I think
we might have done well tonight. We'll see how it all shakes out. Okay, I'll start.
I don't like how this goes. I'm slamming this laptop closed.
Give us 0 stars on Apple
I can't wait to create so many different Apple accounts and like just give you all the negative reviews if this.
10 courage. Well, you don't know how it's going to go yet. So just hold your horses there.
I mean, also if you're going to go to that lengths, I mean that means we did something right because we had an effect on you. You feel a certain way.
You moved me. So. Yes, that's
we were provocative. Give the people what they want, and I think that's kind of give the people what they want is kind of I feel like an undercurrent here in Tim's argument and of kind of the impression I've gotten of this album. In some ways it's a remarkable pop album. And I think making music is an ideological thing, right? Because you have to have an opinion about something to make music. But I think these women seem to have so effectively sort of like translated some part of themselves, them essential selves, to create extremely listenable music. And one of the clinchers for me was that bit, obviously, about not necessarily sharing The Wire as the song to get into this album with, choosing Honey and I instead, because it offers a different take and it gives you a glimpse into what this album can do, the breadth of dynamics that are at play and what they can, and like ways in which they express their skill on this album. All these are really well-made points, and add that to the fact that you sort of like, here we come back again to this thing of the people's perfect albums capture a moment in their own lives, right? And so I think that was that's always going to be a really strong pillar to build your case on, is like, hey, I know exactly where I was when I was listening to this thing. And I'll never be able to forget that. Those all give me a great feeling about the case Tim made. What about you, Michael?
I mean, I appreciate you coming in and acknowledging it as pop from the beginning, which felt like the only way to really to describe this. I also appreciate the fact that your memory of this album. I mean, we have a lot of our guests come on. We've had multiple guests now come on who sort of give us two lists. Where they give us one list that's like, I think these are probably objectively perfect albums by certain standards, but these are the ones that I have good stories about.
Right.
And like, I just also appreciate you acknowledging that like part of what makes this quote unquote perfect for you is the personal connection that you have to it. And I do also appreciate you questioning the existence of perfection, which is honestly something that we all do.
Yes,
and pretty much every single episode, although I do think I still do feel like there are certain albums we're waiting for people to come bring on that I feel like a lot of people would agree and acknowledge that they are perfect. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, last week we talked about The Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd, which is sort of like one of those albums where people just say like, oh yeah, of course, that's on the list. When are you talking about Thriller? When are you talking about Tapestry, which we already have? Like, those sorts of things. So
you get into questions of influence at that point. That's kind of, I think that's the main factor at play with what's defining that other echelon. We don't even need to say it's upper, right? But it's just a separate echelon of albums that have this level of influence, and they're pretty freaking perfect, Anyway, we digress. This is a pretty solid case, right? I think this was a job well done.
I mean,
do you want to put it to me, or you want me to put it to you?
I mean, Tyler, what do you think? We've heard Tim's case. We've listened to the album multiple times. We've really given this a lot of thought. We've processed everything he's had to say. Yeah. What are we going to do, Tyler? Does this album, does Haim's Days Are Gone go to 11? Can it enter the pantheon?
It absolutely can. Yes. Well done, Tim.
Here.
Yes, absolutely. Let the ladies in. All right, come on, let the Haim ladies in. We love them. Yes, absolutely, Tim. Well done.
Yay! Thank you.
This is also making me realize now we really do need a fanfare sound effect for this.
We do.
If we're gonna have a sound effect for like the deliberation phase, I also think we need to have like a little ding that plays whenever a guest says Radiohead, because I feel like we just need to
that's good.
Need to acknowledge it. I'll put it on my to-do list.
Yeah, let's start working on that.
Anyway,
Tim, this was a hoot.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun.
Super happy to have you. Hope you had a good time. We wanted to give you a chance to plug anything that you want to plug. What's your life?
I'm just going to do two things. One is another album I considered. One is not personal, and one is personal, or more personal, but also respected for its own merits. So another album I considered for this was McGee's album 2-Star and the Dream Police, which I think everyone should listen to. That's MK.GEE. He is an insane musician, one of the best guitarists I've ever listened to, creating some of the most insane sonic things that I've ever heard in songs, while still making basically, I mean, it's very Haim. He's like making 80s popish music, and in the modern age, in the weirdest, even weirder ways though than Haim.
Yeah.
So
sort of anachronistic. It's fun.
It's so good. Everyone go listen to that album. It's so good. And see him live if you can. I have. It's nuts. And then the other thing I'll plug is my wife and two other writers who are partners of hers and friends have created a narrative podcast. It's all women, female identifying writers, called Femme Future Perfect. And it is, it's short, like less than 10 or less than that minute episodes that are all within sort of horror, sci-fi, fantasy world.
Cool.
And so it's their effort to, bring out some female identifying voices in a world that is often dominated by men. And yes, I am also on one of the episodes, so I guess I'm keeping in mind. But that is not why I'm plugging it, because it's a really cool project, and it is worth your time.
Sounds rad. We can get behind that. Michael, we co-sign that? I think we co-sign that, don't we?
I think we might be able to link to that in the episode description.
Wow.
I believe we will.
I think it's
day. Called a hyperlink.
Hyperbalink.
It is very dad energy up in here.
Yeah,
very
solid dad energy going on here.
I love it.
You want to bring us out, Michael?
Yeah. Well, Tim, thank you so much for joining us. So great to see your face. Once we're done recording, I have to talk to you about Cherubs. Yeah. So we'll do that in a second. But dear listeners, how did we make we made it through the entire episode and did not acknowledge another member of the Cherubs family making it onto the podcast?
Ding!
Anyway, there we go. We need ding for that too.
Ding for Cherubs reference.
But dear listeners, if you have not listened to Days Are Gone in its entirety, you should go ahead and check that out. And go ahead and follow us on the social medias. We got a Blue Sky now.
Got a Blue Sky.
So you find us over there too. Yeah. So thank you so much for listening, and I guess we'll see you next week. Is that right, Tyler?
We most certainly will. See you later, y'all.